with the keynote speak of Mr. Professor İlhan Tekeli. Değerli misafirler, sevgili
Esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, the second day of our summit is about to start. In a couple of minutes, Professor Dr. İlhan Tekeli will deliver a keynote speech. Please be seated. Thank you for your understanding.
Once again, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, honorable mayors, dear guests from Turkey and abroad. Welcome to the second day of the very first meeting of B40, Balkan Cities Network. Yesterday was a very fruitful and exciting day. As moderating summits such as this for almost like 10 years, I have to say that it's been my first time to see so engaging audience and mayors and delegations so eager to collaborate and share ideas. We heard many valuable opinions and contributions, and I'm pleased to say that today's program is also very rich and fulfilling. We will start with the keynote speak of Professor İlhan Tekeli from Middle East Technical University. He is renowned social scientist, sociologist, and urban and regional planner. So now I would like to leave the floor to Professor Tekeli to give his speech. The floor is yours.
Çok teşekkür ederim.
Thank you very much. Well, today I've structured my speech like that. The title of my speech is "A Democracy Befitting Human Dignity Can Only Be Built Locally." You cannot build a democracy centrally. Well, this is a thesis that I propose here, and I will try to formulate it here. When I was communicated that this meeting would be held, my colleagues and my friends asked me to deliver a speech on democracy. Well, this is a topic that I really like to talk about, and this is something that we urgently need. So it was a great pleasure for me to accept this proposal. Establishing a network for Balkan cities. It's a great initiative, actually. For years, I've been involved in municipal activities, and with this capacity that I have, I am truly aware of its importance because we are in a society of networks at the moment. This is the era that we have, and the Balkans have cities that are quite close to one another, and these cities establishing networks like that, it's something that we need to appreciate. And I would like to congratulate all my colleagues and friends who have taken the initiative to do so. But this speech, well, I am delivering this speech at the moment. Well, Balkan cities share a similar culture. We're in the same part of the world, but I'm not going to talk about the proximities and similarities that we have. We all know the similarities that we have, but I would like to touch upon what we need to achieve together. What we need to achieve together is actually democracy. And in particular, I believe that democracy is something that local administrations should embrace. Can a democracy be possible if it's built centrally? I have doubts about that. There's one thing interesting, though. We're talking about human rights here. Well, in 1948, for example, a charter was ratified, signed, and there is this understanding of human rights that we've had since then. And one of the most fundamental rights that we have is the right to life. But the UN documents do not only indicate the right to life, it's actually the right to life with dignity. And the part with dignity is quite important because this is what we need to achieve, indeed, providing people with the right to life with dignity. How to do that or how to actually achieve it collectively. This is important. The right to life with dignity, actually, democracy pops up in our minds because without democracy we can't really talk about the right to life with dignity. But what do we really understand by democracy? Well, we are actually talking about something right when we say democracy, but we're not really precise here. And to put it forward precisely and clearly, we need to discuss about it. We need to talk about it. We need to understand one another on the very subject of democracy. And this is what I'm trying to do, actually. The right to a decent life and how to actually do it in the democracies that we're trying to build. Well, today, we all know that we have representative democracy, and this is the ruling understanding for democracy that we have. Representative democracy is actually an instrumental democracy. And this type of democracy does not necessarily involve a program for democracy. This is actually a facilitated method of holding power. This is what we actually have in terms of representative democracy. Well, representative democracy is a tool in two dimensions. The first is actually about how to hold the power or come to the ruling positions. This is a roadmap. And the second is actually about the legitimacy of how decisions are made and taken. And there's something interesting here. We're talking about the majority of votes, and the majority of votes is the core of legitimacy, but we're not necessarily questioning that. Well, the majority of votes, what kind of an assumption does it have, really, for us to establish this concept of legitimacy? And there is this interesting assumption underlying that, and this is about people in societies, and they are atomistic individuals, and they exist without being affected by one another, or their satisfaction with life can be attained individually. This is the assumption that we have in front of us. So, isolated individuals and their legitimacies, and the arithmetic cumulative of that, and it actually needs to pass 50%. This is the assumption that we have. But to what extent it reflects the truth and the facts? Are individuals really atomistic people? And their quality of life? Their quality of life, is it only based on their hedonistic consumptions? When we ask this question, this is not really true. This does not really reflect the truth, because individuals aren't like that. People aren't like that. What represents individuals and humans? Anthropology, for example, let's have a look at it. Well, individuals aren't necessarily standalone items. They exist in relation to one another, according to anthropology. And only to the extent that they are in relation to one another how do we really spot the position of representative democracy then? When we ask this question, the root of representative democracy, it is related with an assumption on human beings. This is what we're asking, and this is the point when we understand that it doesn't reflect the truth. Another question pops up. How can the democracy of these people be when they're in relation to one another? We know that actually, but we can't actually achieve it in practice because this is participatory democracy. In practice, to what extent can we actually attain it? To what extent can we achieve it? Interesting that we have a question here. Our constitutions, they're all based on standalone individuals. And in terms of representation, there are two categories, individuals and societies. And this is how constitutions are formulated. And within these constitutions, there is not really a basis for the legitimacy of representative democracy. However, the lawmakers propose an alternative constitution. How? They're not actually discussing that. How should a constitution be established for individuals who are in relation to one another? Today, we're discussing constitution, and the only constitution they're discussing is actually the constitution of people who are standalone individuals. I'm not a lawmaker, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really know what really cooks in their kitchen. Maybe they have this understanding of participatory democracy. Maybe there are those people who basically cook the dish of participatory democracy in their own respective fields. But there is one question that I'd also like to ask here. Representative democracy, what are the confines of it, and how to actually tackle the limitations and the confines of representative democracy? In my lectures, there is a reading list, and there is one paper. It's a paper on the Middle East countries, those who aren't Democrats, and the democracy of those people who aren't Democrats, says the paper. So representative democracy, you don't really have to be a Democrat for you to hold the ruling position. When you get the majority of the votes, you can actually come to power. And the power is a game. The ruling position is a game. When we're talking about this, it's a zero-sum game. So they can't do it, I'll do it instead. This is bad, I'm good instead. This is the general understanding, and this is a marginalizing discourse that we see. And within this discourse and rhetoric that the power is held and attained, and the entire public sphere, as a result of this zero-sum game, is quite segregated and marginalized. With this understanding, those individuals who aren't Democrats have a democracy. This is an oxymoron, though. This is an oxymoron, and this is the concept that we have. In fact, what do? We actually organize democratic elections, but what do we really elect? The dictator till the next round of elections. This is what we elect. And this claim of democracy or being democratic, we are somehow electing the dictator till the next round. This is what we do. In this case, what happens? Behind closed doors, those people who have the power, the rulers, assume that whatever they do has a legitimate and democratic reason. Well, democratic legitimacy doesn't really spring from having attained the majority of votes. Well, now, I don't want to go much in detail here, but within such a democracy, the rulers and the decisions that they take behind closed doors, those decisions that aren't accountable, that aren't transparent, what do they cause? They cause actually a huge gap in democracy. What I mean by this gap in democracy, this is about the demands of individual and the public authority. So this is actually a disagreement between the demands of individuals and the deeds of public authorities. And this gap in democracy, I'll talk about that till the end of my speech, because it's quite a fruitful concept indeed. But there's one thing I'd like to touch upon here. Well, yes, representative democracy, this is something that can be abused when I talk about it, when I describe it like this. But Democrats make use of representative democracy in a manner to tackle this gap. Because we have representative democracy because this is something that has continuity, that has constitutions, and we don't have any alternative to that. In this case, within the representative democracy, we need to tackle the gap and shortcomings in democracies. And we need to develop practices to this end. And for us to do that, there are politicians who are involved in this endeavor, many politicians that we have are aware of how representative democracy is misused. This is why they're seeking ways to improve it. Although it's not really anticipated in the Constitution, they have practices aimed at improvement. And there are two channels through which they improve this situation. One of the channels is about the strategic topics for society, transparent and accountable decision-making processes and implementation of that. This is one of the channels. Well, recently, when I say recently, I'm talking about 2 decades ago, we started to use a concept rather than administration, we've started to use the term governance. So governance is something that is aimed at this. But there is one other thing that we need to focus on. Well, representative democracy, and to tackle the gap in the democracy that it causes. And the only way isn't governance and institutionalization of these governance structures. The second channel is to do with civil society organizations and how to actually provide a chance for them to be public entities. Because if there is only one public authority, and if it is the only public authority that guides the way, that shows the way, in this case, only the requests of certain circles are addressed. In this case, the gap will widen. So to tackle that, to address that, civil society organizations, non-governmental organizations should have a way to become public entities and public subjects. And in my presentation, I was trying to do the following. Representative democracy and the practices of representative democracy are being abused at the moment in the world. And I wanted to talk about this, and I also wanted to talk about how practices that are more democratic can be attained. But this is basically the second best solution. But I wonder if we can actually overcome that. Can we attain something better than the second best? I'm going to ask this question in the remainder of my speech. And for me to present this question, well, we have mayors with us at the moment, they're politicians. But there is one thing that I'd like to ask here. Why does a politician become a politician? What kind of a satisfaction do they derive from it? And I wonder if politicians who derive alternative satisfaction from it can make sure that alternative forms of democracy can be attained, and what does it really mean for the sake of democracy? Well, for sure, we're talking about different alternatives here, but I don't really want to take much of your time in this discussion, so I'd like to talk about two forms of politics here, or two forms of politicians here. And I cited this before. It also coincides with the assumption that standalone individuals are what make up a society versus looking at societies as composed of individuals who are in relation to one another. So if they have different assumptions, what kind of practices would they carry out? So politics, under what circumstances does it really add a meaning to a politician's life? There's one thing that we can say here. Individuals, humans, aren't really satisfied with being administered or governed. They don't really like being governed. But they consent to it. So consent, how does it really take place? These two questions are somehow complementing one another. The first politician, the first type of politician, imagine a politician, well, their assumption of society is based on standalone individuals, and they say, well, this is one thing that they believe in, and they are actually portraying themselves to a particular society in this manner. And they say, I truly admire my society, but at the same time, I'm a person who knows what's best for society. And I also know how to carry this society from one place to another, from one point to another. And this is why I take part in politics. As for democracy, it actually serves as a tool, as an instrument that this politician would utilize to attain its goals. And it's not only going to be something that will carry this person to the ruling position. This will also provide legitimacy to his agenda. The second type of politicians wouldn't really think like that. For their society, they don't really claim that they know what's best for their society. A stress-free society with a great focus on human dignity, a society headed towards a certain progress. So this is an internal dynamics that basically springs from the society itself. So this is why the first politician takes part in politics, according to their claims. So in a way, this is not something to attain. This is actually a journey to take together. So there is not really something that the politician gives to individuals. This is actually a proposal for a journey together. What does it really mean? It's actually a proposal for a decent life, a life with dignity. And the first type of politicians would like to create a hope for the future. So there are two types of politicians and their strategies for holding the ruling position. The first politician would do the following. They would say, vote for me, let me have the ruling position and I'll carry you to a better place, they'd say. And they don't really offer any programs or schedules. Rather, they create a cloud, a sketch for hope. This is what they put forward. And all the individuals within a society start filling in the meaning of this hope that is proposed or put forward. But if it's more hardworking, if it's more modernist, let's say, they'd put forward a program. And there is this narrative in Turkey, as you would know, rulers would turn to the opposition and say, come up with a solution, come up with a program or agenda, they'd say. So this kind of perspective being based on standalone individuals, and this is the perspective that they have for the elections too. And such a perspective, such a viewpoint is based on the program or based on the agenda and the illusion that is created by hope. And this is how they'd like to attain the ruling position. But the second form of politicians or type of politicians, they say something else to the public, something to be attained collectively, a new way of life, creating it together. In other words, a new social dynamic and creation of it. And actually, they offer a position of partnership to individuals. So this is something, this is a chance for individuals to be creative. And this turns life into a more decent life. And the first type of politicians as for the quality of life and the concept of satisfaction in this life is somehow based on hedonistic consumption. This is the assumption that they pursue. And the second type of politicians would make sure that success isn't based on consumption, but rather it is based on the shared excitement of achieving something together. This is shared satisfaction that they offer.
İkinci, demokratik olarak verilen de karar olmaktan çıkıyor. Demokratinin gerçekleştirdiği yaşam biçimi oluyor. Burada karar yaşam biçiminden bağımsız bir şey değil. Yaşam biçimine yedirilmiş bir kavram. Şimdi bu tartışmadan sonra esas tartışacağım konuya geliyorum. O da yönetimde merkez ve yerel arasındaki iş bölümünün demokrasi sorunsalına nasıl yansıdığı. Şimdi demokrasi konusunda böyle bir tartışma yaptıktan sonra şimdiye kadar tartışmamın bu bölümüne kadar ele almadığım iki konuya ele alacağım. Birisi mekan boyutu, ikincisi ise ölçek boyutu. Yönetimin yahut demokrasinin ölçeği ve mekanla ilişkisi. Mekan boyutunu ve ölçek boyutunu aslında
I will be analyzing all those issues in a very simple manner. So if there is a certain country and if this country has some management issues, then the rational way to tackle this issue is to have cooperation between the central and decentral, local, so to speak. So what is the rationale behind this cooperation, and within this understanding, where does democracy stand? Let me open up a parenthesis in here. So my discussion goes into the central and decentral aspect of democracy. However, there is one way to open up this issue. The European Union has come up with a concept entitled multilateral governance. And this is a refined version of the relationship between central and decentral. And the main topic is subsidiarity. And this is about the cooperation in the European Union, and subsidiarity brings up a certain issue, a multi-level issue. Subsidiarity is a highly important topic, and once the central government gathers all its forces and abuses the governance, then subsidiarity might be of use for us. But I won't be using subsidiarity, and I will go on with the dichotomy between the central and decentral in my speech. So when we accept such a dichotomy between the central and decentral, then comes up the following issue. The central governments might have dominance over the decentralized or local governments, but on what claim? How can they go for it? Where does their legitimacy come from? And what is the boundary? How can they make this claim legitimate? Where does this guardianship, the right to guardianship, come from? As you may imagine, Turkey is already a signatory of a European document. However, Turkey has not accepted the articles around guardianship of this European document. Well, as Turkey makes a reservation around the articles on guardianship, is there a certain rationality behind it? We should ask ourselves these questions. If we are to discuss the rationality or non-rationality of this understanding, we have to go into the theory behind this decision. We may argue that the national states do not abide by the subsidiarity principle, and the central government tends to gather all the forces. Therefore, the quality of democracy may be improved through the local government reforms. So the decentralized government or local government is further strengthened through devolution. So the only way for the center to abuse its power is not through getting over rights. There are some alternative ways, and we can easily experience this case in today's Turkey. The central government in Turkey, well, one of my students wrote a thesis. There are 22 decentralized institutions, and those institutions do have their own working principles, and they are independent of the central government. In relation to the central government, there are some local exercises, and let me tell you what the conclusion is. Well, the center and the central government and the local government, if the central government and the local government are controlled by the same party, then we won't see any problems. However, if the central government and the local government are controlled by two parties, the central governments may exert power on the municipality, and the central government might even set up an alternative municipality. The most interesting example was experienced in Aziz Kocaoğlu period in Izmir. For instance, the office of Prime Ministry was opened up in Izmir when Aziz Kocaoğlu served for the local government. So what kind of an ethical issue does it bring up? Well, the power does and should respect the people who have voted for them. However, it is clear that the government does not respect the votes for the opposition. So this stance towards the votes has brought up an interesting democracy issue. So the legitimacy of democracy is not abided by through this understanding. And there is a double standard imposed by the central government in this way. So given the point that we have reached, my question will be as follows. The central government, between the central government and local governments, what should be the cooperation between the central and local government? Well, of course, we need a certain cooperation. However, the central government and the local government should have an appropriate cooperation in place. How can we have it? We may argue that in an attempt to have this cooperation, we should ask ourselves what the center is about and what the local is about, first and foremost. And within this discussion, the rationale behind the cooperation should be revealed. Well, local is paramount. First and foremost, I must note that local is paramount. The information of the local and the information of the central government are totally different from one another. The quality of information is definitely different. Local might offer us a perspective from two points of view. First and foremost, the place that we live in and the space that we occupy, the buildings that we live in, are all about the local. When we wake up, we know where the physical materials are. They guide our life. We are very much accustomed to where we live. We have some common life experiences. We have face-to-face relations. it goes beyond the communication. It's not about the messages, it's about the emotions. We exchange feelings and emotions with the local. We get socialized within the local, and we are in relationship with the local, and these relationships do make our life more meaningful. And we exist through these relationships. The humanitarian values find a life through the local. The rights of human beings is not just a text that we read in the Universal Rights of Declaration. We materialize those rights within the local. The individual becomes one with his or her surroundings, and it becomes a part of our identity. In today's era, the local has a certain definition. Local is against the global, and the global and the local cannot be known in a rational manner. We can only get information through local in a more clear way. The global and the local are also the spaces of flow, and these flows might change the local. From this perspective, we have three paths to follow, and one of the ways that we may follow, well, what I mean is that there are three ways that we may follow, and this understanding of parting of the ways is kind of problematic because we might make mistakes. Well, we have three paths to follow. The first path that we may follow is giving up to the transformation created by the external elements. The local, in this way, gets rid of its identity and we get silent. And the second path is as follows. There is this danger of losing the cultural richness, and we might not speak out, and we might strive to preserve the past. And in this understanding, the local is kept within the history. And the third path, which I would like to follow and which I prefer personally speaking, is about being connected to the rest of the world and becoming a part of the transformational journey of the world and revealing the identity of the local and reconstructing the identity of the local in a seamless manner. Each and every locality in this understanding should further improve its identity by being connected with the global. If you believe the third path is the right path to follow, then the information to understand the local is also transformed. Well, having some information around the local with its people, with its materials is not enough. You should have more information about where it stands in the world and have a more global perspective. When we consider local from this perspective, what comes out is that we might make a mistake because the local itself turns into a subject. However, the local itself is not a subject. What is local? Local is where the individuals live, and the local is constantly evolved in an attempt to follow up the global and to be in line with the global. So the behaviors of the individuals cannot be boiled down to one single element. However, all the individuals will contribute to the evolution and transformation of the local. So where does the mayor stand in this locality? Well, the mayor himself is one of the individuals within the society, but he is a guiding figure, so to speak. So there are two types of mayors, as I told you. If there is one mayor who does not want to follow up the path of democracy, then transformation, the journey of transformation, will not be possible. Only if the mayor is willing to follow up the third path, then a transformation will be materialized. Local has a certain story. You cannot get away from it. You cannot become foreign to this story. Grasping this story and grasping this story without any issues around democracy will be materialized within local democracy. And we cannot have a central understanding. The central democracies might be built through the local democracies. Therefore, we should ask ourselves what the function of local government will be, and we should address how its relationship with the central government will be addressed. Well, I'm about to conclude my speech, excuse me. What we mean by central government brings up a certain cooperation. What will the central government do in terms of cooperation? We have the local government. Does the central government have a different territory? No. So it is the sum of the territories of the local governments, right? From this perspective, making decisions, setting up rules is something perpetuated by the central government. However, we should ask ourselves what the rationality behind central government is. The first function of central government is to keep the local governments together and to set up a new social atmosphere. So it has some certain roles to play. For instance, regulating the foreign relations, defending the country, setting up the infrastructure of the entire state, and making use of the subsidiarity principle are the functions of the central government. Well, these are the normal roles of the central government. However, if there is this over-centralization, then it is clear that there is an issue around democracy. And in an attempt to eliminate and tackle this issue, local should assume more responsibility. Well, I'm about to conclude my speech, and I would like to wrap it up. If in one single country the quality of the democracy is to be improved, then it is clear that we should invest in improving the quality of local democracy. If we can set up the local democracy in the most appropriate manner. If there are no democracy issues, then the function of the central democracy will be set up once this local understanding is established. We cannot set up democracy from a top-down approach. If you set up a democracy through a top-down approach, then you're going to have more and more issues. If you would like to set up a local democracy, what should you do? There are two issues that you have to take into consideration. First and foremost, you should have a non-polarized community in place. In Turkey, one of the main issues is to think of the community on a scale of neighborhoods. We have some urban level communities instead, and in an attempt to set up an urban level community, you should have a public space strategy. And this public space strategy is not only about the space merely, it regulates the activities taking place in the public space as well, and how we can become innovative within the public space. Thank you very much for your attention.
Professor Tekeli, it was so enlightening. As Professor Tekeli stated, a democracy that gives the right to live with dignity begins with local governance. That's why I want to ask honorable mayors if they want to contribute to Mr. Tekeli's speech. And I'd like to give the floor, first of all, to Mr. Mayor İmamoğlu, because some of the notes that Professor Tekeli stated are actually your own experiences. As a journalist, I witnessed that about central government and local governments. Do you want to share your ideas and thoughts about it?
Teşekkürler.
Thank you very much. Well, when I listened to Mr. Tekeli, of course, my experiences came to my mind. I felt like he was talking about me only. It was like he communicated the issues that we have experienced so far. Well, democracy is a very much valuable concept, and it is the most important concept of the 21st century, but we should have the right definition in place, and we should have the right practice. Therefore, as I listened to Mr. Tekeli's speech, I wrote down a couple of important elements. I would like to underscore them. For instance, the problems around democracy. This is an important topic. So what kind of a democratic issue are we experiencing in this current system? We should ponder on this issue and we should act upon it. The written documents or regulations might not help us. And we should make use of our own capabilities and get rid of the issues around democracy. Subsidiarity is another term that Mr. Tekeli dwelt on. And the democracy should begin with the local governments. This is something we have to underscore. It is clear that democracy cannot be established through central government. With regard to Istanbul, anti-democratic issues are surrounding us, and the fight that we are having against anti-democratic approaches is highly important for us, and transparency is the best weapon of us in Istanbul. Transparency, the principle of transparency helps us a lot. We share what we are doing with the citizens. We are very much open to sharing our ideas with the public opinion. And I think transparency is a weapon that is paramount for us. We definitely talk to the citizens and we share our complaints with the citizens. If there is a certain understanding of democracy in the society, then the citizens can easily understand you. I believe that I am very lucky in this sense, since I'm a mayor of Istanbul, and I can easily tell you that the public opinion is supporting us. Another example to transparency is as follows. When I came to the power, I had a principle of screening the council, and we had live events. It was a great experience to see many people watching our council. And I believe this issue is still very much on the agenda. For instance, the Budget Council 1 week ago was very much active, and around 15 million people watched us live. So I believe transparency is a tool that strengthens the local actors. We have to display anything and everything to our citizens. We have to share what is happening with them. When people ask me how I would like to be remembered and what kind of a mayor I would like to become for my city, what I have always told you is as follows. I would like to be remembered as the most democratic mayor of Istanbul, because it would definitely make me happy. And I believe a democratic stance will have repercussions on anyone. And each and every person should be deemed as a citizen, be them young or old. I feel it is the source of creating a happy society. Well, we have had a couple of practices. For instance, we designed public spaces, we had some projects, and we were not satisfied with it. We had competitions, and the citizens themselves voted in these competitions. For instance, more than 400,000 people voted for the design of the public spaces. I believe this is a very high figure. Moreover, for the very first time, in a city of 20 million people, we had participatory budgets in place. And in doing so, we received hundreds of offers, and following the analysis of the experts, we voted for these projects, and 150,000 people voted for this project. Each and every democratic step is owned by our people. It's not only in Istanbul, it's not something peculiar to Istanbul. I think it is the same case all around the world, because the world itself is not as big as we thought it was previously. World is small. It's in our mobile phones, so to speak, and we might reach information anywhere and everywhere. From this understanding, the issues around democracy might be tackled through more participatory decision-making mechanisms. It was 10 days ago that we initiated a project entitled Istanbul is Yours. Through this application, the citizens can do anything. They might even exercise the subscription practices over there. They might ask questions over this application and do anything and everything around Istanbul. So it's digital democracy that we are applying. This understanding of digital democracy, I believe, is what we need in the 21st century. It's a highly important tool in the century, and this tool will enable us to scatter democracy to a large mass. As a conclusion, I would like to conclude with a couple of sentences. So, I believe Mr. Tekeli already communicated what we are experiencing. So the tension between the central government and the local government is something that we are experiencing, and I have attempted to define what we have experienced so far. I would like to wrap it up, and I would like to state that we need maximum participation in the 21st century. I believe anti-democratic practices will end through maximum participation. Maximum participation will definitely enlighten our road. Once we have common understanding in place, once we have common sense in place, we will become more successful. So we definitely need the sense, the understanding, and the mind of the people for whom we are serving. Another issue is as follows: the new generation democracy. And new generation democracy covers all the points that I have discussed so far.
İnovatif tarafı
And maybe this is something that we need to strengthen the innovative part and involving all the new practices. Next-gen democracy and building it is something that we need to do, perhaps, because next-gen democracy, new generation of this democracy, will be important for Generation Y and Generation Z, because this is going to be something that analyzes their own expectations, and maybe this is going to be something that will address the expectations of these generations. This will also be this would also include the methods that enable the tools to address their expectations. This is what I think. Last but not least, I believe that all mayors are brave Democrats, especially the mayors on this table should be brave, courageous Democrats. This is what I believe. And this will bring about a brave democracy as well. Courage and supporting participation and inclusion will help us build happier societies and more sensitive societies all around the globe. And a democracy-based speech was delivered by Professor İlhan here, and he also shook us up a little bit with some of the warnings. And I will also have I just wanted to share some of the practices out on the site in relation to his remarks. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mayor İmamoğlu, it was such a fruitful discussion. That's why I want to ask honorable mayors if they want to contribute to this discussion or if they want to share any ideas. In a second. Would you mind pressing the...
I would like to add a few words to this discussion. Is it possible in Albanian? Do we have the translation? Okay. I nderuar kryetar İmamoğlu, të gjithë të nderuar kryetar, po më i nderuar profesor, po më vjen mirë që keni hap një diskutim lidhje me demokracinë në qeverisje. Unë vi prej Kosovës, është një shtet.
I'm coming from Kosovo. It's a new country, and it's a multicultural structure with many ethnicities. As a society, we've built the society actually after the war, and this has been a rather challenging transition period for us. So what kind of a ruling system is being used here? Well, the system is a central system that we're utilizing. And we're trying to use a central system in a local environment. There are many people here, and all of the people can take part in this central system. It was beneficial for us because, according to this system, there were certain benefits. We also had the chance to hear the opinion of people. It was a chance for us, and this also helped us design our position, and this is how we proceed.
Shumë shpesh janë ndru qeverit dhe nuk ka pas.
Well, ruling parties have changed quite quickly, and it wasn't really possible for us to hold on to a certain ruling party. But for the past 4 years, there has been a ruling party. And as for local administrations and local ruling powers, we always tried our best to deliver the best outcomes and results. And there is one other thing that I'd like to share. Central and local and the relationship between them. If there is a party in the central administration with the local administrations belonging to the opposition party, there is always a conflict between them. But if the contrary is true, so I mean, these positions are held by the same parties. In this case, projects are always supported at a central level, and this is what we have. It's difficult to change it. And at least trying to change it is something that we hope for. Well, because it's not really right. In this century, we need to change this. We need to pursue higher goals. And the needs of people, for us to address that, we always need to stand by them, because people's needs remain untouched, untackled. Sometimes ruling parties change and opposition change, but their changes and their needs remain there, untouched. So if we can address this conflict between the local and the central powers, it would be great, because we shouldn't really have this conflict. We should have this accord. We need to have this agreement, and people should be involved in this system.
Marita Maliki. Anyone who would like to contribute? Now we will listen to the contribution of Kostas Peleditis.
Είναι ενδιαφέρουσα η συζήτηση.
I'm coming from Patras, Greece. This has been a rather interesting speech, because democracy is a word that carries a particular weight, and it is in relation with the local administrations. Well, something that doesn't really follow the rules of the ruling parties. We can't really do anything without following it, and this is a fact in all parts of the world. Democracy, yes, this is something that we all would like to have, but behind democracy lies power, strength, and our societies, our communities Sometimes they have economic power in their hand. And this economic power, there are people who are working for this economic power because our societies are based on classes. So democracy is somehow related with power, and the laws that are passed are only passed to help them achieve what they want. So as a result, as long as economic power exists, democracy needs to follow its pathway. So this is what we've had throughout history. So economic power, whenever it was threatened, it meant that it was the end of parliamentary democracy. This was something that was necessary for the continuity and continuation of economy. So this is what we've witnessed throughout history, and there is something that we need to take into account. And for us to talk about a full democracy, economic power should be held by the majority of people, and this majority of people should elect, and these rules should be passed in a manner to defend the rights of the majority. So this is when we can talk about the rules. And as for our own municipality, I'd like to add one thing. So, Mayor of Istanbul, I would like to add on to what you said. Yes, we have a democracy. Yes, we have democracy as well. We were elected through democratic ways. But looking at the content of it, acting in a democratic fashion. So for us, we need to solve the problems. And for this, we need to have the power and strength to do so. Are there any tools, for example, that you have? Central governments, don't they really decide how much money we will have, what kind of a budget we will have, how we will behave? So democracy this is the democracy that we have. So the democracies that we pursue are dependent on the democracy that the central powers have. So this is the amount of democracy that you need to have. So actually, words aren't enough. We need more time for it, but it's great that we're discussing democracy at the moment.
Mayor Paladitis. Now we will continue with Filip Zorizic.
Thank you very much. Please. Poštovani profesore, dakle, donošenja odluka. Je li to dijeljenje politike s narodom? You have translate, yes? No? Okay,
Yeah, it started. Just let's be sure that we understand you clearly. Can we hear the simultaneous interpretation right now of Mr. Zorizic?
Rodom, zašto jedan političar postaje političar? Je li to zbog toga da bi društvo učinili boljim? I još važnije, je li demokracija danas i loše korištenje prava? Je li to to? Je li to zatvorena i otvorena politika? Je li danas uopće upitan opstanak demokracije? To je ključno pitanje, ali nema prijevoda.
Mr. Zorizic, so sorry for interrupting once again, but I think that no one can quite hear the translation.
Okay.
So I will ask the control room and simultaneous interpretations if they can let me know that we are ready to hear Mayor Filip Zorizic, then he might continue. Now we can, okay, I think now we can hear you. Let's try one more time.
Možemo pokušati, u redu?
Yeah, yeah.
try?
I think.
Yes.
It was a technical
Is it
problem.
okay for
They're
professor?
informing me right now, so I think it's going to be all
Mogu
right.
ispočetka?
Thank
Može?
you. Thank you
Hvala.
so much.
Dobro, neću dugo, dakle pričao sam o reprezentativnosti.
I'm going to repeat for technical reasons. I made comments about democracy. Democracy may be used for malicious motivations. And the key word here is transparency. So transparency is quite important in decision-making mechanisms. So a politician, being a politician, do they become a politician to make society a better place? And this is where the question of democracy comes up. What is open politics and what is closed politics? So does this really to do with using democracy for malicious reasons? So participatory democracy, we're talking about it because the professor cited two types of politicians here. So, and can they be really independent from one another? Well, people do not really like being ruled, he says, but this is not really related with the entire world. This is about the Balkan region, but is this really a democracy? And why are we using the ruling powers here at the moment? And 20th century, is this the future of the 20th century? Well, or should we really focus on the future democracy? So we need to think about that, I believe.
Contribute? Okay. Would you mind?
Is this okay? Because I'm going to speak on Serbian.
Now we can hear you properly. Yes. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor.
Ja želim samo kratko, pre svega da se
I'll be quite brief here. Thank you very much, İlhan Tekeli. Your presentation was great because a great question was posed, and it was good. And many questions were asked, and this would require huge answers too. Well, actually, I am quite close to humane democracy or human-oriented democracy. Well, certain circles of people have these questions, like Eric Fromm asked this, and such a level is the level that we can attain when it comes to having an impact on democracy. Thank you very much. I wanted to touch upon this, and we wanted to thank you because the human-oriented democracy and the approach, such an approach, like many questions are there to be dealt with and many answers to provide.
If there's any mayor who likes to contribute. Okay, to Mr. Hassan Aziz, could you please press the button?
Благодаря много.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, first and foremost, to Professor İlhan Tekeli for his great speech. And as İmamoğlu, I felt like a student at university, and it was a great pleasure to hear from him, hear from the professor, because it was a lecture on democracy. As we talk about democracy, I'd like to utter a few words. First of all, I'd like to thank the interpreters, especially the colleagues who are interpreting from Bulgarian. So participatory democracy is one thing that the professor cited, and there is a principle. In representative democracy, There is one thing that I understand here, and this is one thing that I'd say in Kardzhali. I share it with the dwellers, with the citizens there. And citizens are actually a mirror for you, and you need to see yourself in this mirror. So everybody should have a say in the municipality. And Mr. Kerimoğlu from Kerimoğlu, he shared an example from representative democracy. A great song was delivered, conveyed, and everybody had the chance to hear their own voice in that song, and everybody had the chance to find something relating to them. And the second point is, everybody should hear their own voice in that song. I lecture at 2 universities about local administrations, and one thesis that I have is that representative democracy constitutes the basis of democracy. And the reflection of democracy, as Mr. Tekeli cited, is actually subsidiarity. Without the delegation of powers or responsibilities, as the professor said, we can't really talk about subsidiarity. In the recent years, this has been something in our own democracy, but there's one thing I'd also like to add. If a municipality cannot act like a mirror of society, in this case, this society cannot develop, cannot make progress. I've been in the opposition party for around a decade, and my party is an opposition party. But still, we've actually gained the trust and confidence of people, and for the past 12 years, I've been in this position.
Contribution that our honorable mayors will tell us, but I have to remind that I don't want to postpone your bilateral meetings, so I will kindly ask the mayors to limit their speech for maximum 2 minutes. Mr. Kesimoğlu, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. This is the second day of the Balkan Cities Network Summit, and I'd like to greet you all cordially. As we all know, local administrations are the first step of democracies, and local administrations central administrations have always been a stage for conflicts of interests. But as the people heading local administrations, we need to understand the supervision of this tutelage in our decisions. We wanted to have autonomy as much as possible, but to attain the holistic structure, they basically exert power on us. As other colleagues, I've had the chance to be an MP for 8 years, and for the past 8 years, I've been a mayor. I had state positions. I also had NGO positions. So I had the chance to interact with many stakeholders, and I've seen the advantages of being on both sides. And the problems that we've faced are definitely different out on the site. And these problems are really difficult to overcome, difficult to tackle, because countries are actually a country of rules, and there are exceptions and there are rules. These general rules are always implemented to those who people would like to otherize. So all the exceptions are somehow confined to them. They're implemented specific to them, who people want to otherize. But we always need to focus on the validity of fairness and justice. And for justice to be strong, those who hold the power should also be fair, and they should be just. And Although it may be perceived in the same manner, there is a huge difference between politics and policy making. So politicians or making politics, although they are perceived in the same manner, they are different concepts because politicians think about the upcoming round of elections. However, policy makers think about the next generations, and each and every stakeholder that we have here are basically people who are involved in politics, making policies, and they are considering the future generations and the circumstances under which they will live. I believe that we should all take a stance from today onwards to think about these issues, and I believe that this is possible. So democracy isn't really about us having influence on the minorities. It is about us defending the rights of minorities or groups who basically constitute minorities. And I believe that this approach will also help us address all the existing solutions. Thank you very much, and greetings to you all again.
Now we will continue with the Mayor of Mytilene, Mayor Stratis Gitelis.
I would like to send my greetings to the professor. Democracy was born in Greece, as you know, and it spread the world from Greece. And this is what we're talking about. And all societies have an experience in democracy. And we need to inform people about that, making the communication of democracy. And for us to attain it at a local level, well, this should be, it can be, for example, on the economic level. We need to defend the rights of certain groups and we also need to respect the rights of people who voted for us, who made us stand where we are today. And in the coming discussions, I believe that this is going to be the level on which we speak and discuss, and this is also going to help us reach an accord between us. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Share their ideas. Can you just press the button if you don't want? Then I can just let you do. Thank you so much. Mayor Puliak.
Yes, dear colleagues. Well, it is connected to the topics, but it's not about democracy. It's about why we are here, not only today, why Homo sapiens are here. And I wanted to share something that I read 2 days ago in New Scientist, which is connected with the general idea of the cooperation and the collaboration. So the title of the article is Why Homo sapiens Outlived Other Humans. And they say, we once shared the planet with at least 7 other types of human, and ironically, our success may have been due to our deepest vulnerability, being dependent on others. And let me just share a few sentences. Humans today are uniquely alone. For the majority of the existence of Homo sapiens, we share the planet with many other types of human. At the time when our lineage first evolved in Africa some 300,000 years ago, there were at least 5 others. And if you are going to place a bet on which of these, Neanderthals, Homo erectus, and the others, would outlast all the rest, you might not have put your money on us. So why only humans survived? Many explanations have been put forward: brain power, language, or just luck. Now a new idea is building momentum to explain our dominance. Ironically, it may be some of our seemingly deepest vulnerabilities: being dependent on others, feeling compassion, and experience empathy. That could have given us the edge. So we are today here as Homo sapiens because we have collaborated and cooperated with each other. And this is precisely the idea of our network. This is why I'm confident that we will succeed, because all our region, I think, depends on these kind of initiatives. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Pula. If there is no more contribution, oh, all right then. Could you please press the button, Mr. Lewis? The floor is yours.
It's okay. First of all, I would like to thank the professor for this inspiring lecture. And I will not take much of the time just to share one of my thoughts on which I am inspired by the Mayor Imanoglu speech. As you said that the transparency and open platforms that can make people participate in democracy will change our point of view on all the processes. I think that while we are speaking here, out there is whole new generations using the technology at the way and in the manner that we in this room cannot imagine. They are 24 hours a day online. They don't even now use the networks, social networks that we are used to. They are developing the new ones. They are contacting with each other on the new platforms. And in the future, that process will just speed up. And that will cause the future evolving of democracy. It will not be possible for those who have the power, either economic or political power, to suppress that kind of processing information, transforming information. And in my opinion, the main reason for the optimism for the future of democracy and for the further developing of democratic processes is just about that. It's in the point where the young people will get used to sharing information, and that processes will just speed up, and the people with the power and anti-democratic intention will never could catch them up anymore. I'm out of time, sorry.
Mayor, you're always really kind about timing. Thank you so much. And the point you stated is really valuable. That's why we are also really optimistic. Has any mayor, right, just, could you mind please pressing the button? Yes.
Thank you very much. I will talk in Romanian. I would like, vreau să-l felicit pe...
I will talk in Romanian. As the mayor said, this is a great act of power and courage. Well, implementing these decisions is also a great indicator of your courage. The fact that you're doing it and expressing that is a great indicator.
Any mayor who would like to? I think that's fine. But it was really fruitful discussion, and thank you so much for all the contributions. Honorable mayors, dear guests, now I would like to invite you to the mapping show on the exhibition area to promote the cooperation between B40 cities. After the mapping show, our mayors will have their bilateral meetings between until 12:30. Then we will move on to the lunch. After the lunch, we will gather in the same room to review the presentation on the outcomes of the technical sessions. Now I would like to invite you, esteemed guests, to the mapping show area.